Thank you guys so much for coming out. We're with Roland. He's the founder and VP of growth of Housecall. And I can give an awesome intro for him, talk about all the work he's done at Qualcomm, etc. But I'd love for him to do it because he's a serial entrepreneur and he's done a lot of stuff. So I can go and touch upon a bunch of different points, but he's going to touch upon the most interesting points. So Roland, please tell them a little bit about your background and what you've done to become the founder of your company today.
Sure. So we'll reverse. I grew up in the Silicon Valley, grew up in Palo Alto. Dad did 2 tech companies, so I've always been around it. Moved to San Diego to get just far enough to just be able to be alone and out of his reach, but then carved my own path. So went to UCSD, took a 4-year break. I started a dive company down in Cabo San Lucas. Ran that for a while. I funded that with money I won from playing poker, which was previous to that. Once I came back, decided a degree would be useful. I went and founded my own music and technology company. We did a whole bunch of like EDM kind of events and conference-like stuff. And there, Qualcomm happened to be one of my sponsors. And through that, I found kind of a way into Qualcomm to get the big boy job, to put that on my resume. And that's actually where I met my current co-founders for Housecall. So spent some time there, built some really cool products. And while we're there, we're making a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of time. So the problem we were looking to solve, which is why Housecall was created, was we wanted to find plumbers that were trusted at the click of a button. So we started out by building Uber for X, which ended up not being the right idea, but that's okay because it led us to Housecall Pro, which is what we're building now.
So one of the things that I know about your market, and we were discussing about it earlier, is whenever an entrepreneur comes to me and they say that they want to get into the market of basically, what would you call your customers? And
home service professionals. So think plumbers, carpet cleaners, HVAC, home cleaners, window washers.
Yeah, so I always tell people, do not get into this market. Whatever you do not sell these people because, as Roland knows, they do not have any online profile. Now, that's why I wanted him to come up so badly because he's done it successfully. But tell us, what were those early struggles? Because obviously, jumping into this market, did you know how hard it was going to be to sell to these folks?
No. But as we were building out the kind of the Uber for X model, what we started to realize was like, oh my God, these plumbers, they're running like Google Calendar, if that, pen and paper, so like triplet forms, and they would have whiteboards up and paper everywhere in their offices, and they weren't using anything like marketing-wise to retain their customers. So that's where like, oh my gosh, this has been largely ignored. Like we could totally build Housecall Pro. So we started working on building out that side of the market. Now, in the early days, it was actually pretty easy to find customers because your first 10 customers usually are people that you know. And so the first home cleaner I onboarded was my home cleaner. The first plumber that I onboarded was my plumber. And they were pretty easy sells. Then as we started to scale is when things get more difficult. So to tell you guys a little bit more about our market is there's about 2.5 million of our potential customers that are in the home services space. Half of them have 0 online presence. So when you guys look around, and I always do this when I'm thinking about like, oh, maybe I'm gonna buy like a new car or something. As soon as you think about that car, you see it everywhere. So I'm gonna tell you this and you're gonna see this. So after this, tomorrow, the next week, you're gonna see, but they're trucks with phone numbers. You're gonna see like a plumber with a phone number. And that's it, and that's all they have is the truck. There's no online presence, there's no nothing. And this is like half of our market, so where do they exist? And so scaling and growing our company is finding some of them that are online. Maybe they have like a Yelp page, right? Or maybe they show up when you Google plumber LA. That's half of it. And then the other half are these cars that you see on the road with just a phone number on them. So that's a tough cookie to crack.
Oh man, I can't imagine. And then just right off the bat, how did you know that you had product market fit with this demographic? And then second of all, before you guys had product market fit, did you bring your co-founders on board? What was that jump from Qualcomm? Did you guys already have the idea in your head, or was it jump and let's figure it out?
Yeah, so Qualcomm's notorious for like IP licensing, so I won't tell you at what point we actually made the jump, but we had kind of a thesis in our mind. We'd all worked together. We had built a product inside of Qualcomm, so we knew we could do that part. And once we all agreed, we all told our girlfriends and wives and families that we were going to take no salary. And that was a pretty big jump. That's an entrepreneurial jump. And you have to take that A lot of people are like, well, maybe I'm just gonna do this side hustle for a little bit and just gonna keep side hustling, but then you're always kind of in between two worlds. They're like, I like the steady paycheck, but I like the side hustle more, and you're kind of stuck in that, which one do I choose? At a certain point, you just gotta be like, I'm just gonna burn the fucking bridge. Right? And once you burn the bridge, you go forward, and you put all your energy towards something, it's gonna actually become something much, much quicker. So that's what we decided to do, because there was no more turning back. Qualcomm would not have that. Now, we didn't burn like the bridge with like relationships, but just, you gotta say like, all right, now I'm gonna put all my time and energy into one thing. And there's nothing wrong with getting a side hustle going to formulate kind of like an idea and prove that you can actually start building some revenue before you make the jump. But at some point you gotta make that switch. And the sooner you can do it, the better, because then you're gonna focus all your energy on it. And that's what we did.
And then in terms of product market fit, when was the moment that you're like, this could be something?
Sure, so the Uber for X model was very difficult to build. We found that it cost us, let's say $100 to acquire a customer, and it would take us 18 months to make it back, and that was just not a very sexy, scalable model to go raise VC money to keep building the business. But what we found was these guys had no way to organize their business, to run it, to run like a modern company, right? Like text messages that say, hey, your plumber's on the way, with a picture of his face, things like that. So what we did is, we spent a lot of time with our customers. We spent a lot of time shadowing them. We do ride-alongs. We'd sit along in the plumber's truck, and I would just be his little lackey. I'd be a very overqualified techie lackey, but I could carry things and I could dig ditches and things like that. But from there, you actually learned what they were doing day in, day out, and you really start to learn your persona. And then from there, we started kind of building out like what it would look like, a tool for them to run their business all from their phone, which was Housecall Pro. And then we started finding product market fit. And I don't think it's something where it's like, there's a light bulb moment where all of a sudden it's like, we got product market fit, time to scale. It's not like that. It's just a progression of getting better and better and iterating on that. So we launched our product January 2015. I sold it to a plumber that I did not know. So that's the next step. And I made him pay $4 a month for the product. We now charge anywhere between $49 and $249 a month for the product. But back then it was $4 a month. And then the next month we raised it to $8. And the next month we raised it, I think the next step was like $20. And we kept raising the price every month or every other month. And a lot of people are like, oh, you can never like sell a product and increase the price. You can only like go down. So shoot high and then go low. As we shipped more and more features and kept, luckily my co-founders, they're all technical. I'm just like the idea guy / hustler. But because they could code, every single month we'd ship new features, new things, and the product became more and more valuable. So we'd charge more. And then what people often think is like, if you go out to sell a product and you have people that tell you no, that's good. So where you find product market fit is where if you get the chance to show your product and you get half the people to buy and half the people to say no, that's when you're finding your equilibrium point. And a lot of people don't realize, because they're like, oh man, I want to sell 100% of the people, right, that I show my product to. That's the wrong way to think about it, because you're underpricing yourself. If 0% of the people buy from you, well, you're nowhere near product market fit, right? You're like way off. But get to the point where half the people are like, yep, totally, and half the people are like, no. And it could be no because it's too expensive. It could be no because it's not ready yet from a feature perspective. But that's what you should try to aim for. And we always stayed within that realm as we started hiking our prices. So we knew that we were still within like our band of what we found is our product market fit.
So early on, you had mentioned, you're like, okay, customer personas, became important. And were there any customer personas that scaled, maybe in the first 2 years that you really focused on before you started doing more of a broad sweep across the market?
Yep, that's a good question. So in the home services space, you've got like kind of like the Roto-Rooters. You guys all know Roto-Rooter when I say it? Okay, right, it's a brand name, it's a franchise. You have like Stanley Steamer or like Coit, so you got the big boys. We call those the elephants. And then all the rest I call the rabbits, and that's really like the 0 to 4 trucks, right? So someone might not have an official truck, like they just have their own personal car where they do jobs from. And so our initial persona, because we only had the mobile app, was the owner operator. It was the guy in the truck by himself, or maybe him and his like cousin Johnny that was like helping him with like the hoses or something. So that was like our initial persona. And then obviously the market is much bigger. And as we learned that maybe there was like a wife, right, at home who really did all the work. She did all the dispatching, the QuickBooks, all the things. And really it was just maybe the husband out there that was literally like digging the ditches, turning the wrench. We're like, oh crap, we need to have like a web portal. So then we started building the web app side of things. And so now all of a sudden, like our persona changed a little bit. We could serve all the owner operators, because just from the mobile app you can run your business. And then as you start to grow, now you have multiple trucks on the road, you need to have that web portal so you can dispatch, and so you have a different persona now you're selling to too, which is really the dispatcher or the office manager role. Whereas before it was just the owner operator where he does the dispatching, his own calendar, his own invoicing, his own customer remarketing, all those things. So the persona changes over time as your product matures and as you add different product lines, but it never is just one persona forever, or at least on our experience.
So I want to jump into something a little funny, maybe a little bit painful. So what were some of the things early on in your business that you tried in terms of customer acquisition that didn't work?
So in the early days when we were just Housecall, right, the app for your house, one acquisition strategy we tried, you can Google it later, but just Google Housecall Elf. But our target at that point, the persona, was maybe the middle-aged housewife, either single or head of household, that made all the purchasing decisions for the home, and we're trying to figure out how do we get this app on her phone, right, to get a customer to book the plumber. And so one thing we did was we delivered Christmas trees. And so we were walking by, what's that Halloween costume store? Party City. And my girlfriend's like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if you like wore that elf outfit and then you deliver these trees? And I was like, why? I was like, well, you know, you're a guy, so it's easy for you to pick up a tree, put it on your truck, put it in the home, do all these things. But imagine for someone that doesn't have a husband or doesn't have that person that can like go do that, or the truck or the car or whatever it is. So we're like, oh man. So what we did is we subsidized the cost of Christmas trees. We filled our office full of Christmas trees. And then we would deliver via the app. So someone would go into Housecall, click like buy a Christmas tree, small, medium, or large. And then I would put on my suit, put the Christmas tree in the truck, and go drive to the customer's home. And what I did was I targeted all the mommy bloggers. And if you don't know, they're very influential. They're very localized, especially in San Diego. But once they posted the picture of me delivering the tree, all of a sudden I had a lot of mommies requesting trees. So we got a lot of customers that way. Then it worked for a month and a half. And then after that we did the $1 Christmas tree pickup, which was just like, oh my God, never do that again. But it got its users, and but obviously something that's not scalable. And you'll hear people like Paul Graham say things like, do things that don't scale. But there's a lot of truth to that because there's insights in there that you kind of learn, like what can work, what's repeatable, what's not, and then if we were to do it next year, what would we do? We determined, obviously, as we pivoted to market towards Housecall Pro, that was a different thing. But this is, I don't know, one failure story, but it's a funny one.
So let's talk about what did work. What got you maybe your first 5,000 customers on board, or first 1,000?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like there's those markers, and people try to like compartmentalize as like different things. Those buckets, they're really just order of magnitudes, and then they're different based upon like the price of your product, right? So if you're selling a product that's like $100,000 a year, like you're not going to reach 1,000 until you're a $100 million company. If you're selling what we are, we're really like our ACV, so average contract value annualized, is about $2,000. At about 1,000 mark, I would say something that worked really well in the early days was just brute force. People were like, well, what's brute force? Well, if you think about it, you got to put your hat on to your customer, or customer hat on. And as a plumber, you cannot ignore your phone. And the reason is because the phone is the means for which you get business. So the plumbers always have to pick up the phone. So now that you know the plumbers have to pick up your phone, what can you do with a phone? You can dial it, right? You can cold call. You can text blast it. You can ringless voicemail, drop voicemails on their phone. You know all these fun things now where the plumber can ignore it, where if you've got, let's say 250,000 of them in the US, you can just load up a list of phone numbers and start dialing away. So in the early days, we brute forced a lot of it, where we would send, for the ones that we had emails, we'd send emails, right, with like, why do you want to run your business in a more modern way, right? So content that would help them, why they should accept credit cards, because customers pay more money when it's not cash out of their bank, when it's just put on plastic. So we taught them that way. And then we would do just cold calls. Literally, I would pick up the phone and say, hey Josh, how's it going? Yeah, look, hey, I found you on Yelp, and I noticed you got a lot of great reviews. That's awesome. You'd be like, oh, yeah. And he still can't tell if I'm a customer or not, right? Like I could be a homeowner or I could be trying to sell him something. I say, well, so Josh, what are you doing to keep track of all these jobs? The reason why I ask is because I help your competitor, Billy. You know Billy's Plumbing? I promise you, every plumber knows the other good plumbers in the area. He goes, fuck yeah, I know Billy. What's Billy doing? I was like, well, we got this software where you can schedule, you can invoice. What are you doing for invoicing? We're like, I don't know, just these pieces of paper. I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Like, it looks like you're really successful. Don't you want to be able to like grow your business? And someone would be like, no, I don't want to grow. I don't want to manage people. Because a lot of people get into business to not manage people. I go, well, look, wouldn't you like to charge twice as much as you normally are? Yeah. It's like, look, I can talk to you about this all day long, but if you're like me, I'm a visual kind of a guy, why don't I just show you? They're like, oh, okay. Like, let's hop on a web demo. They're like, the fuck is a web demo? And I'm like, well, this is what you do. Just go to this like URL, and it was like join.me, and they're like, join.me.what? I'm like, no, .me is the TLD. Wait, what's a TLD? No. So we had to create like custom domains that are easy for them to type in, and then they would show up on the web demo. And when they would come on the web demo, we'd be like, okay, can you see my phone on the screen? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, now imagine this is your phone, and this is how you run your business. Let me show you what it looks like. So now you pretend to be the customer, and so you know, in the early days, we would do all of that to then engage our customers, brute force it, and that really is how you get your first 1,000 customers is doing that ourselves. And in the early days, you know, I started doing all the demos. So if you guys are sales oriented, so there's like an SDR role, right? So SDR, so this is someone that's booking the demos. And there's someone who's the AE, we call it ES, enrollment specialist, but account executive, the one that does the demo, and they have like an account manager or like a CS rep. So in the early days, as a founder, you have to embody all three of those things. Because if you can't do it, imagine trying to find someone to go do it for you. So in the early days, we did that, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh man, I don't want to book any more of my demos. I'm tired of calling these Yelp people. So then you hire 4 salespeople, because you never want to hire just one. Minimum is 2, but I like 4. Because one can't do it, he'll quit, he'll suck, or she'll suck, whatever it is. And then the third one, they're gonna be like marginal at best. They're not gonna be that good. But then the 2 that are left over, they're gonna be competitive, and you're gonna know if it's working or not. So I hired the first 4 SDRs, they would book demos for me. So then all I was doing was demos and then account management. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, you 2 SDRs, I'm gonna make you the account executives, right? The ES is what we call them. And then I'm gonna go hire 4 more SDRs. And then I was just doing the account management part, which is the onboarding part, making them successful with the product. And then once I figured that out and they're doing demos, now all of a sudden I promoted some of those that were more farmers, not hunters. I made them into that CS kind of account management role. And all of a sudden now you have like a nice little system that you've built that's kind of like working and humming along. And that's how we got our first 1,000 customers.
Wow. And then in terms of getting the key people on board, because it wasn't just you doing all this stuff, right? Can you talk about maybe some critical hires that you made that helped scale out your team and come up with some good ideas to help do this as well?
Sure. So in the early days, so my other co-founders, they're all technical and engineers, so they would build the product. So they're focused on that. And so my CEO and co-founder Ian, he's like a product god, and he's great. So I could like leave them to that. And then on like the growth side, it's just, you know, all the early hires were just young, hungry people that were intelligent, they could execute, and they had a passion. Whether it was for our industry, but they're passionate about something. And those are the 3 things that I look for in every hire. So whenever I hire anybody, I throw numbers 1 through 10 on all those things, and that's how I compare hires to one another. So it's intelligence, passion, and execution. So in the early days, my key hires were those people that were just hustlers. They worked for little to no money. They were all commission driven. So they were just eating ramen, but I also gave out huge commissions if they did close. And so the early days, my key hires were those hustlers that would go do the grind with me side by side. As we started to grow, obviously you want to start bringing in leadership and people that have already done it. So in the beginning, I would say do not hire like a VP of sales and think that like that's going to work. Like that's the worst idea you could possibly do. You want to do it yourself and find people that have never either done it before, or if you're selling something that's maybe more technically complex, that have some domain knowledge but not too much, but just have like the passion and they're just smart and curious. And then as you start to grow, we finally hired like a VP of sales probably when we hit 12 salespeople, and even then we probably hired him too early. But then once we grew it to about, we let him go after a while because he wasn't a good fit anymore. But then we grew it to about like 40 or 50 salespeople. And at that point, the board had us hired like a COO who had like done it before, done all the things. And then I just offloaded that whole beast, like off of me, go work on other growth stuff. But yeah, there's different stages. There's no magic bullet, but when you're doing key hires, especially like early on, how many of you guys, by the way, how many of you guys are like early stage startup? How many of you guys are like mid stage? So like early, like raise your hands. Okay, so lots of early. How about like mid-stage, like between 10 to 50 people, mid-stage? Do we have any like late stage, like 100 plus? Okay, so a lot of stuff that I'm telling you right now will work. Just go get the hustlers at the lower end of the scale if you guys are just starting, because those are the ones that will take you the farthest.
So I find it really interesting that your title is like VP of growth, but you're also doing sales stuff. And we had this conversation a little bit earlier. I come from this background in Silicon Valley and SF, that a lot of growth people will never consider sales as part of their job. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, and also how you use that mentality to help really scale your company in terms of call centers, etc.
Yeah, so growth means growing your company. So encompasses all the things. Obviously, there's all the sexy stuff that you post, which is like all the growth hacks. They'll work for maybe a month, 2 months, maybe 6 months before it gets closed. And so if you don't have like a good framework for finding those things out, you're pretty much lost without him and like looking at the guides. But beyond all that, like growth is just getting customers to your product. And so for us in particular, because we can't just go scrape LinkedIn, right, and write really great content on LinkedIn to go get them, we had to find other clever ways to get in front of them, which was like phone calling, right, texting, emailing, like, and doing it like in mass, right, because there were lots of customers. But when you think about like from a discipline perspective, you have to be able to flex in the different areas. I'm not like a natural salesman, but I'm not terrible at it. But it is a way that plumbers respond to, and it's a way that a lot of people sell to plumbers. So think about like, how does your persona buy from other people? And then just if they're already buying from other people doing this type of thing, you just got to replicate it, because it's nothing new. You can't fail. And a lot of people think like, well, business, you got to do like, what's the 10x thing, or what's like the one growth hack? Like, oh my God, I figured out this one Instagram way to go get all my followers. And that's cool, but like when it comes down to it, you only have to be 10% better than the other person trying to sell them something. And so just look at what's already out there, which has kind of led us to build, an outbound call center. So when you think about, I was telling Josh this earlier, but I always thought like call centers would totally work. You guys familiar with Home Advisor? Have you heard of Home Advisor or Angie's List? Okay, they have like 1,000 people in a US call center. Okay, so they're obviously selling some product to our pros, not similar to ours, right? Because we actually help them. Oh, that's a bad take. But they sell in that way. So we go, okay, so if they're doing it, we can do it, then we can do it better somehow. And so then, I had this whole thesis around, okay, well, we can do cold calls to them, like at scale, but it's kind of expensive to do it here in the US. So how could you outsource it? And so one of the things we thought about is, okay, maybe we go to the Philippines. The problem with the Philippines is, remember, we're just selling to like a Trump-loving plumber, America, fuck yeah, when someone calls them from the Philippines and you can't determine if they're male or female, the plumber's gonna hang up, because they're gonna instantly, it's like a call center, something's going on. You try to call from India, instant hang up. You try to call anywhere from the Middle East, instant hang up. Where they don't hang up is, we have a call center now in Mexico, when Pablo with a Hispanic accent gives them a call, because guess what? It could be their subcontractor. And so it's something they're familiar with, and it just comes down to like really understanding your persona. And once you understand who your persona is, who they deal with, who they work with, you start to think about things where like, okay, now how can I reach them? So steal something where someone else is doing it, someone successfully, so Home Advisor is just calling people, plus like add a little bit of Hispanic mix to it from the call center, that works great. And then what you want to do is you want to layer that into all the other processes you've built out, which is like booking demos, doing demos, getting demos attended, and that whole funnel, building that whole framework out. And now you can just throw fuel on the fire. Now you got to do list building, clever ways to scrape things, keeping that beast fed, and then how does that feed our internal people, which are in San Diego. They do the demos, so we don't do any demos like overseas or cross-border, and grow that. I don't know. Hopefully it's just part of the question.
So you've been able to scale your company, but one of the parts that I do find the most fascinating, not necessarily the growth on the acquisition side, but on the retention side. So you have someone come on board, and then they're using your app for, it's like 2.5 hours a day on average, I believe. And then if you could talk a little bit about, how important that is in terms of the value of your app, because, you have tons of apps out there. You have meditation apps that's like use 5 minutes a day, right? And here people are using your app for 2.5 hours. And there's a lot of relationship building that goes into that if they're using it for that long.
Yeah, so essentially we become such a big part of their day that they're always using it. So the mobile app is 2.5 hours every day, the web app is 7.5 hours every day. So like they're constantly using our app to run their business world. And then once you have that kind of attention and engagement, like how can you use that to create like acquisition channels? And so one of the acquisition channels that we know, and you probably know, how many of you guys have had like a home service professional at your house that did a good job? And of that, how many times did you ask them, hey, do you know somebody like other than what you do? So like, for example, like a plumber does a good job and you're like, hey, do you know like a good handyman? Or do you know a good thing? Have you guys done that before? I see some people nodding your head. Yeah, the reason why is because there's this element of trust that you built up with that plumber. And so now all of a sudden it's like, okay, we've figured out plumber knows a drywall guy, the drywall guy knows a painter, the painter knows a carpet guy, the carpet guy knows a window cleaner, the window cleaner knows a power washer, the power washer knows a maid, and so on and so forth. And they all know each other because they all hang out. And they all drink beers. They'll go to Applebee's at 7 a.m. in the morning to go to B&I's, Business Network International, craziest like subculture no one here knows about, but you can go look that up later. And so they all know each other, and so you kind of mix that. Okay, so now they all know each other, and now all of them are using our product, and then we have their engagement on our platform to use their business. Like, how do we marry those two? So now what we're working on is building a community of these pros so they can send jobs to one another, because that's what they do in normal life. And once again, I go back to it, you learn that by like walking in their shoes, by talking to them, by listening to them, and you see them sending jobs to each other. It's like, hey Josh, man, like, yeah man, that homeowner was awesome. Like I made so much money off him, I owe you like a 10-pack, right? And so you see this behavior happening where like, you owe me one, I owe you, and they're like doing it, but now like how do you digitize it and then use that to drive new growth channels? And that's kind of something unique that we're working on that'll take us from where we are now to 10x to where we are now.
So as with any web app or mobile app, you're always trying to get people to reinvest in it, and maybe it's to fill out their profile or at least do something else that says, hey, I've invested more time, more effort, and it gives them a reason to come back, that they don't want to lose it. So I want you to talk about how do you create that experience for your customers?
Yeah, so owning your own business there's like a lot of pride that goes into building your own business. The most fun part of building your business is A, seeing if that URL exists, B, making sure it like exists across all those social media profiles, and then C, getting your logo and like coming up with like the name, like the whole process. And so when you think about what you have a lot of pride in, it's like that logo, because that's the logo you put on your sleeve, you put on here, and it's gonna be like everywhere, and it's gonna be on the side of your truck, right? It's gonna be you're gonna get your truck wrapped, and it's everywhere. So when we think about our product, it's like how can we help our pros build out their invoice, which contains like their logo, when they upload their employees' faces, because our app will automatically text the picture of the technician's face to the homeowner when they're arriving, right? And then how do you build that feedback loop? And when you think about how can you add more loops to your product where it makes it more sticky, now all of a sudden when I show up at Josh's house, Josh goes, oh, hey, Roland, yeah, you look like that guy in here, and now all of a sudden I trust you. It might not be a big deal because Josh is a pretty big guy. He's not that intimidated by me, but for a housewife that's possibly alone with kids, and all of a sudden there's a weird man, right, that's coming into your home. That's like a whole different level, and so we build those natural interactions as a way to solidify the value of our product. And so by getting them to like we have loops built in to get them, hey, upload your logo, and we have like input your bank account. Why? Because customers, they want to pay by credit card. Why do you want this? Because they pay more money if they pay via credit card, right? So like we have identified these core kind of KPIs that we try to get pros to engage with along a step pattern. And if they start to go kind of off the railways, we build other things to kind of keep them on the railway to do what we know other successful pros do.
And then in terms of retention factors, I know you guys have a big community online, and you guys are doing a lot of work there, and go ahead and just go for it.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is for our pros, a lot of them are lone wolves, right? So they'll be in the truck all day long. The only interaction they have is with customers. They don't have colleagues. They don't have the water cooler talk, the bullshit, the office gossip, who did what with who with what, and like all these things that exist in a normal office space. And within this, there is a sense of community with our pros and kind of this sense of fraternity. And so, where do plumbers go to learn? Most of them maybe didn't get a college education. And so they're very street smart, maybe not book smart, but how do they learn how to build a business? And so around there, we've built another, what we call it kind of like a moat, right? That makes our product defensible, which is our community of pros. And then from there, we now have a Facebook group of probably like around 4,000 pros, and they're in there all day, bitching about the 2.5 ton, 13 SEER HVAC condensers that have been breaking all summer long. They talk about the crazy cat lady who had like shit everywhere because she was like a hoarder, and they were posting pictures of it, and they're like, how much would you bid for this job? And they're like all very opinionated. They're like, I hate those customers, I hate them too. And all of a sudden you create like all this tension within the group, and you know they love those things. But within that community, now they can only be a part of that community if they remain a Housecall Pro customer. So if they leave our product, we kick them out. And nobody wants to be kicked out of a group where they've made a lot of friends. And so those types of things, if you think about what products we're doing, it's like, how can you get your customers to talk to one another? How do you get them to learn from one another? And then on top of that, what we've done is, obviously we have a Facebook group, but we do events similar to this. We started similar to this. And now we do events every single month where we have like 300 pros in one room. A quarter of them are like HVAC, a quarter of them are plumbers, and they all share each other's price books, and they go and we teach them about SEO, we teach them about digital, we teach them about how to run a business, how to hire people, how to find people. And so we created this thing called Masterminds. So you can go look at it later if you want, but hcpmastermind.com. But we host those events. That's all part of what community is. And that is a retention device. It's also an acquisition device, because guess what? Coming to an event like this, how many of you guys came with someone else? I see 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4. So a lot of pros too, they like to bring either their significant other or their buddy, you know, that's not using Housecall Pro. And all of a sudden they're like, fuck man, this is awesome. I want to be a part of this thing. And it's almost timeshares-y in a way, right? Where everyone's buying. You don't want to be the one person that doesn't buy the timeshare. And so they're, you know, they're all there and they're like, man, this is fucking cool. Like, I want to be a part of this. And they join. So just another unique growth strategy, but it all comes back to like seeing how they interact in person. What do they do day to day? That came from that BNI comment that I made. You can go Google that later. But they literally meet at Applebee's on Wednesdays. Not just Applebee's, guys. They go to like higher class places as well, like, I don't know, not like McDonald's, but maybe like a step up. But they'll literally go there at 7 a.m. and they just hang out, and there's one plumber, one electrician, they have a doctor, a lawyer, it's like one of each thing, and they all share leads with one another. They do this every single week. And they take attendance, and they pay like $1,000 a year to be a part of this damn thing. And it's a franchise Ponzi scheme, but they do this. And when you see them doing these behaviors in the real world, you're like, man, how can we like digitize this? How can we use this to like aid our growth? But it comes back down to knowing your customer. And I've been to so many of these freaking BNI meetings, pretending to be like a computer repairman. And I'm like, hey, look at my app, guys. And you know, that was in the early days. That channel was not scalable. Because they make you try to join after the first session. They're like, if you want to come back a second time, you got to join. And they put you in like a room to get you to sign a contract to pay. I was like, no, guys, I'm not really joining. I'm just building this software here. And they're like, So word travels. So all the people in San Diego know me, but you gotta walk a mile in their shoes before you really understand. And from that, you'll get lots of growth ideas. And a lot of people don't do that.
Very, very true. You know, you find a lot of product people, a lot of people who spend, you know, the years doing, you know, technical things, and they jump in and they don't know how to interact with customers and don't really know how to, you know, walk in that customer journey. So we talked a lot about, you know, what worked. I want to hear a couple things that really just didn't work. So if you could think of 2 things in your business that you tried maybe on a large scale and that failed and that people can learn from, you know, love to hear it.
Sure. So we had a thesis that if we did a lot of advertising in one geo, right, so like a city, and we did it across a lot of different channels, we can concentrate a lot of marketing firepower in one place and then make it magically work and spark. Now, it's not dead yet, but we've done it now twice, and it has not worked the way that we wanted it to. Now, every single time you do one of these things, it's not bad if you don't get the end results you were expecting. But it's bad if you don't learn from it. So every single time we've done these things and failed, these geo campaigns, so what I'm talking about is like in Austin, right? We did a podcast, we did radio, we did newsprint, we did Google, we did retargeting, we did Facebook ads, we did street teams. Like we did this whole like campaign, and you know, you drop like 100K in one of these campaigns, and you know, from that I expect at least 100 enrollments. You get like 1, and you're like, fuck, oh, what did we do wrong? So we're still trying to extract now, like, what did we learn from that? You know, what things can we do? Like, are there things that we're not able to measure, right? Are there other people that happen to sign up in that area but didn't come through one of our landing pages or wasn't automatically tagged through Salesforce? Like, where are all those like sitting and hiding? And then also like, is this campaign meant to drive like instant signups, or is this like a longer game, right? Is it like SEO? Is it like content where you got to spin it up and it returns dividends over a long period of time? You might get some like a little blip right in the beginning, but after that, it's just weaving all those long tails and stacking them over time. And so, do we need to do more geo campaigns? I don't know. That's an example of something that didn't work. We've done, what else have we done? Plumbers don't search for field service management software. It's a highly competitive keyword and highly competitive on CPC. And there's tons of lead sellers out there that I hate and despise, but I also am envious of their business model. So if you don't know what those are, is they will bid on those keywords and then sell it to you and 3 of your competitors. So now you're paying, let's say $80 a lead. So they've made $320 on that. So they can outbid you on a PPC basis, like any day of the week. And then you have a 25% chance of winning. And if you do the demo, 50% chance. So bidding on those keywords at first was like, oh yeah, of course we should spend a lot of money on that. We should buy all of the things. Didn't work. Too competitive, too highly priced. There's other better ways to do it. Now, we still buy leads from them, but not in that kind of the quantity that we thought initially that we should do. Lots of channels too, by the way, guys. Like they'll work up until a certain point, but after a certain point, there's diminishing returns on a lot of things. And so when we were out raising money, a lot of things investors say is they're like, well, this is great. Your CAC is, $500. Like, can you keep it at $500? It's like, yeah, maybe. But of course the answer is yes, totally, we can do it. But a lot of the channels that it took to get us there don't keep delivering at that same rate. So you can't just keep like pounding your head on the pavement over and over again. What you have to do is you have to go find more channels. And people ask me all the time, like, Roland, well, what's the thing that has gotten you to the point where you're now? Like, what's the silver bullet? There's no silver bullet. There's just a bunch of lead bullets. You got to go machine gun style. You got to layer them on there. And we have probably over 50, 60 channels now that we measure, but they all stack on one another, which makes it really hard, like you mentioned earlier, to even try to go sell in the home services space. Because if you're out there searching for the silver bullet, you'll run out of money or time or passion and just quit.
Wow. And I have a couple more questions just before we ask the audience for questions. One is, I want to talk about a time, because it seems like you're a very resourceful person. So talk about a time you had to be very resourceful in order to succeed or find something that worked and grow.
That's a good one. I like these questions. Well, one thing I like to tell all employees is, and what I like hire, and Garrett knows, I brought him in as an intern working at minimum wage. I suckered him into it. Now he's a growth engineer. But I always for all employees out there, I want them to be relentlessly resourceful. And so what does that mean? It's ability to get to an answer even when you don't necessarily even know what you're looking for. And so, in the early days, I'm not a home service pro. I had a dive shop. I did some painting in college to pay some bills, but I didn't know any of the lingo. So when it comes down to being resourceful, it just comes back to okay, I keep looking at who's my customer, who do they buy from, who's in their circle of influence, and I drew it out. And I drew out, okay, this is where they buy from. They buy their supplies from here, and then they go to the house. Okay, so they got a truck, so they must have someone that repairs their truck. Okay, so there's another guy. And then they suck at QuickBooks, so they must have an accountant. Okay, so there's an accountant. And then, they don't know how to make websites. And when they try on Wix and GoDaddy, they look like shit. Okay, so they got to know a web guy or an SEO guy. And then they don't know anything about Facebook advertising. So it's and all of a sudden you start drawing a circle of influence around your customer. You're okay, these are all avenues to get to the customer from some position of trust, right? Because as Housecall Pro, no one knew who we are. People still don't know who we are. The market's so big. But when the accountant says, hey, use this thing, now all of a sudden you're if the accountant tells me to use it, I should probably do it. Otherwise they're going to quit, right? They're tired of my paper invoices. But to tie it back to being just resourceful is you just, especially as we're growing Housecall Pro, is always just deconstructing it, just taking a step back, just reevaluating the situation and seeing where there are things you might have missed the first time around. One exercise we do is we take our persona of our pro, and there's different ones, right? There's the dispatcher, the office manager, there's the owner operator, there's the mini tycoon, right? That's running a $3 million business and taking, $500,000 home after taxes. Sometimes I'm why the hell am I doing software? These HVAC guys are making a lot of money. But when you look at these different personas, you go, okay, so what does their day look like? And it's kind of uncomfortable because I'll call the customer and say, hey Josh, how's it going? This is Roland from Housecall Pro. You're like, all right, cool, I love Housecall Pro. Sometimes they don't know who I am, sometimes they do, if they see me in the Facebook group. I'm like, hey, I just have a couple questions, like how are you liking it? Okay, great. And then I break the ice, I'm like, look, the reason why I'm calling you is I just want some feedback on the product. Like, what is something that we don't do that if we built, you'd really, really like? And so then they like gush about that, and then, so now they feel like they're heard. I'm like, hey, you know what, Josh, like, I need to just understand how to find more of you. You seem like such an awesome pro. I wish I had more of you. Your ideas are fantastic. Can you tell me a little about your day? This is gonna sound a little weird, a little awkward. When do you wake up? I'm like, when do you wake up? You know, I wake up at 5 a.m. I gotta get up and I gotta start getting some of my routes ready for my trucks. I gotta print out all the things, right? Now with Housecall Pro, I don't have to do that, but that's what I had to do, right? And they walk and just walk through the day. What do you do? Okay, you go to the gas station, like get all the minute things. And once you understand the day of your persona, then you're like, fuck, they're in the car a lot. Maybe we should start looking at creating content around podcasts, right? Because they're just sitting there in their truck, dinking around in between jobs. They're just sitting there, they're playing freaking Angry Birds or whatever they play these days. They do use Instagram, but they don't post about plumbing. Although there are some exceptions. They like to do before and after shots. But anyways, like these things you like dive down into, you're like, man, this is a colossal waste of my time. But it's not, because you're gonna find like one little thing where you're like, fuck, I'm totally gonna do that. And that turns into like another growth idea. So when I think about being relentlessly resourceful, it's like having the ability to also like pull back, like reevaluate things, and then attack it from like a different angle. Because there's not just gonna be that one thing that's gonna make your business the big business you all want it to be.
Relentlessly resourceful, I like it.
It works.
So what are the next steps? You know, what does the future look like for Housecall Pro?
What does the future look like? Hopefully bigger. You know, the thing is that, you know, when you start, you never think about being at a company where you're like, you don't know everyone's names in the room, but they all know yours. So that's kind of weird for me still. It gets weirder as you really don't know what the hell is going on anymore. You know your executive team, you know your leadership team, you know maybe like the managers, but then below that, that's really tough. So what's next for Housecall Pro is just finding more good people. I'm looking for like 2 quasi-technical growth marketers that want to work just on my team that have some coding experience or being able to use something like Phantom Buster or what was that one? Phantom Busters, like things like that, because I have a lot of engineering resources working like on product. So for me, like at Housecall Pro, it's just growing the team of just exceptional people. When we hire, I always think about like in a different world, would I work for them? And if you can say yes to that question, you found somebody that you want to hire. Now, not in this situation, right? But like in a different world, would that be? And if that is true, and they have those 3 key things that I look for, and so intelligence, execution, and passion, then they're a strong hire. And so, you know, if we're looking to double our team from, I don't know, 250 to 500, it's a lot of good people we got to find in San Diego. I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, you guys are in LA, so it's not, it's got a much better tech scene, especially out where you're at, like Venice Beach, Santa Monica. More and more companies starting to come there, which is cool, but it's not quite the talent pool that the Bay is yet. San Diego is still like, you know, really quite small, although it's just ranked number 5 on something. I never believe those reports. All the biotech stuff in San Diego really skews it from a fundraising perspective, because it's not like real tech startups. It is a tech startup, but bio. I don't know how the hell I'm gonna find 250 other really good people in San Diego. So that's tough. So like, how do you level up your current people? How do you bring people in undertitled or lower than maybe what they're used to, or have no experience and then train them up? Like those are all struggles that now it's like I'm not thinking about product or growth in so much as, okay, where do you find good people? That's the only true way to start to grow. It's hard.
Well, I think there is a little bit of an exodus happening up north,
Yeah.
and it might help you out a little bit.
Yeah. Luckily, recruiting people to come to San Diego is not like I'm saying, hey, you know what, Josh, I really like you. Why don't you come to Omaha, Nebraska? No like intended harm to anyone that's from Omaha, Nebraska. Here's a guy from West Virginia that's like, Roland. All right, Virginia, that's it. But being like, hey, come to San Diego, that's not too hard to pitch. But when you're looking at like high-level executive talent, it's pretty tough because their circle of influence is obviously in like the Bay Area. When you try to think of recruiting really good people, they've got expensive homes they got to pay the mortgage for up there. So you can't just be like, hey, I'll give you San Diego prices, because they're like, nope, F you. You know, this Bay Area company's giving me this. So that's tough.
Oh man. So let's go into the audience. If you guys have any questions, this would be the time to ask them. We'll take a couple questions, and I'll go ahead and repeat them so everybody can hear as well. So how do you keep your messaging and branding consistent across all your channels, especially when you have 50 to 60 channels and you're continually testing?
The trick is you don't. Okay, so now like the longer answer is a lot of those channels fall in like similar buckets, right? So you'll have like paid acquisition bucket, right? And so you want to have like a united kind of message across that, right? Because if you're doing paid, it's high intent, so you're going to have different things that are convert there. You might have another channel which is more like content driven, so it's a little more fluffy, long tail, a longer funnel cycle, so it's going to be a different kind of message. Our message at Housecall Pro, period, across the board is helping good pros become great pros. And so that resonates through all of our content pieces. But then like all the sub messages, they're all kind of different. So think about like how can you do like an overarching kind of like mission vision statement that you incorporate into all your marketing, but like every different channel is going to require different things. So like high intent, they're looking for fucking running credit cards. So like advertise that to them. We help good pros become great pros because we allow them to accept credit cards, which is what customers demand 71% of the time. Okay, cool, message. So like how can you incorporate that little thing into all these other channels? So as you scale, bucket your channels. Each channels with different levels of intent will have different kind of words that will resonate across it. Keep like one thing kind of consistent if you can, but other than that, like you're delivering different pieces to different channels.
Yeah, what was the reaction from your customers when you start raising prices on them, even though you were adding features, and were some disgruntled? Were, you know, how many came with you on your journey and were like, okay, I see what he's doing?
Sure. So the way that we did it is that whenever we sell you something, we will guarantee you that price for life for that set of features that you bought. Now, if we start adding more features and more things, and you want those things, you can add them onto your plan or not, is your choice. But there's kind of, when you think about feature development, there's new features. Like we just released recurring service agreements, which allows a pro to be like, hey Josh, you know, if you want to get 15% off any future service calls and 2 free services a year, it's $30 a month, right? So we released that feature. And so what we do is grandfathered pros, they don't have to buy it. If they want it, they can add it on. Otherwise, they can stay at their grandfathered price. So what we have is, I still have some customers that are paying $4 a month. We call them like legacy plans or OGs, like original gangstas. And then we have the concept of like a customer ID, which we call org ID. And so usually when we look at those come through, it's like, oh man, that's like a sub 10,000 org ID. Like, oh, look at their plan. It's like nuts. You know, it's like $34 a month. Who the fuck gave them that deal? You know, but like what we do is we honor our original pros that chose to embark on our mission when our product was like literally, it wasn't even a calendar. It was like a way to accept a credit card and like type in plumbing $100, swipe a credit card. And so if they want to move up, they can. And it's our job to educate them through product marketing that they want this new feature. And if they want that new feature, they're gonna go subscribe to that next plan up. Or not. They can always stick on when they're on. Now, what we find is, you know, we have a cross-sell, upsell team that goes through all those OG accounts, and they're like, hey, did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? And so we see a lot of increase in revenue expansion through those original accounts, but it's because we've delivered so much value to them and they recognize it, they want to support our company.
And also I was going to say, do you find yourself having to maybe engage them in other ways? I mean, maybe the community or some other things to keep them happy if they stay on the OG plan? Like, do you find you have to kind of engage them in other ways to make them still continue to see value?
The easiest way to do that, to make people see value, is to flip the question on them. So a lot of people are like, they'll sometimes get annoyed with me because they'll ask me questions, I always answer the questions. But with your current customers, you can say, hey, look, have you ever had a time, and I do this with like, for example, a carpet cleaner, have you ever had a time where, you know, you added another truck, you had to pay more workman's comp, and you just had to increase prices over the board, across the board, like for all your customers? And how did they feel about that? And they're like, well, surprisingly, they understood because they knew the value that I was delivering. They were happy to pay to keep me in business, and they would rather pay it to me than some other random carpet cleaner that I found on Google that maybe sucks, you know, and screws someone up. And so I usually flip it onto them, and they understand. And if you're really delivering the value and you're releasing new features or sub products, if they are valuable, they will pay. And you got them in on an OG plan, and that's cool too. And they can either upgrade or not, but it's their choice. They don't ever feel as if like, oh man, like I should get all this stuff for free. It's like, dude, the world's not free. Like, will you go clean their carpets for free? Like, no. Why should we? Okay, I get it. I'll pay for it. So the question is, obviously for a plumber, why would they share it with another plumber in their area? Because they lose their competitive advantage. And so they're actually kind of like mortal enemies. And so the way that we beat that is we would say, hey, look, if you have the crazy cat lady give you a call and she wants you to do something and you really don't want to do the work for her, but you'll do it at a certain price, wouldn't it be easier if all your other competitors quote her the same price and you have a 1/3 or 1/4 chance of getting the job at the price you want? And so a lot of pros will understand this concept of collusion because they do. In fact, all smart people will collude in any given geo in an industry because when you do that, you can price set. And so the way that we beat it is to say, hey, look, when you're a part of the Housecall Pro community, you're sharing your secrets, you're sharing your service agreements, maybe your terms of service, you share your price book. But wouldn't it be better if all of you guys that are using Housecall Pro are all on the same level? Because imagine if that customer calls any one of you guys, you're all at this price rate. Now that's the new norm. Rather than going to Yelp and clicking request a quote, and then all of a sudden it's a race to the bottom, wouldn't you rather have a race to the top and be a part of the race to the top? Or would you rather be part of a race to the bottom by yourself on your own little island? They're like, all right, I'll join you. I'll join you on your boat. So that's how we beat that. The second question was about finding like the influencers, and then you just run into the same problem. So for us, everyone wants to be the person that goes, hey Josh, guess what I just found out? Like this cool app, I just saw it, and I think it'd be really great for a business. Everybody wants to be that person. If Josh is buying services from me, if I'm his accountant, like my job is to give him cool shit because then they're gonna keep paying me. And so if I'm constantly like a source of new knowledge, everybody wants to be in that position. Whether you're a distributor, right? You sell like plumbing angle stops, whether you're an accountant, an SEO web guy, whatever it is. And so that sale is so much easier through a second party. Like if a sales guy knocks on your door, you're like, you're just trying to sell me something. No shit. When your neighbor comes over to you and goes, hey, you know what? This guy that was just over my house, he was awesome. You should use him. You're gonna listen to your neighbor way more than the sales guy. So it might be a little bit harder to find them, right, and wrangle them. But in the long term, the message coming from them is way stronger than the message coming from us directly. So as you start to scale, you're gonna wanna do that more. And that's why you see companies like Salesforce, right? When you buy from Salesforce, you buy it from a Salesforce salesman. Who's gonna fucking implement it? It's the agency, right? Who are they? I don't know, these random agencies that are out there. It's not Salesforce, right? And so you'll see lots of businesses start to outsource components of that because it's coming from another source, and then the value exchange is way better, right? Because I'm paying the agency to do this for me, and I'm paying them dollars, so they need to do it right. So there's a much better draw there. Same applies for any industry. So the question is, how do you race others while not burning all of your money in the fool's errand for paying the most? So when we take a look at our unit economics, we know exactly the lifetime value by vertical, by size, by all the things. We know exactly up to what limit we can spend at a certain ratio. We also know in the VC market what is the right LTV to CAC ratios that is sexy and hot at that time for our industry. So we know exactly at what point we can afford to get the LTV to CAC ratio to be and make our unit economics still investable, but also so we can go crush the competitors. And so the people that win that war are the ones that really understand their data and have everything set up and configured in a way that you can track everything. The ones that lose are the ones that cannot. Now, here's what happens is you might be able to roll, and I don't have a lot of money. Okay, that's fine. So you need to understand every single channel, and you got to go after the lowest hanging fruits first, so your lowest CAC, and then work your way up until you have no more money to spend. And at that point, if you have good unit economics, it's a simple thing. It's like, look, I can turn $3 into $9, or I can turn $100 into $1,000. So I need your money, and I'll give you a percentage of my company for this, so I can go get more. I'm at this rate. And they have to believe that you can do that if they give you the money to do that scalably across the channels you currently have. Now, that may or may not be true, but at least you've got more money to go get there. And you've currently done it, so it's gonna be at least somewhat there-ish. But that's the challenge as you continue to scale. I mean, that's a very tough question to answer, just from like the burn rate has always increased as we grow like headcount. So there's not like a magic number where it's like, well, your burn rate must be this and then this and you'll get this many millions of dollars. It's not really how it works. What you want to do is you want to keep burn rate as such a way that in between funding rounds, you roughly have 18 to 24 months. And at that rate, you're growing at an acceptable rate to become more and more investable every 2 years-ish. But that'll change. That'll change depending on what the market is. It's kind of frothy right now. It won't always be that way, I promise you. Like, one thing's gonna happen and North Korea's gonna, I don't know, figure something out, and all of a sudden the markets are gonna turn, the wrong way or something, whatever it might be. What I can tell you now is, like, you just need to build a sustainable business on just your unit economics. So even if you had to fund it from your own pocketbooks, you could do that. You might just not grow as fast as you want.
There we go. Well, Roland will be answering questions right after this. So if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to come up to him and ask. I don't know how much time he has, but I'm sure he has, some time to
I'll
do it.
hang out a little bit, yeah.
And I just want to give you a huge, thank you for coming out tonight. It really does mean a lot because you came all the way from San Diego to be here with us. And thank you. Thanks, guys.